You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We are doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And per usual, getting started before I'm fully ready. That's kind of how I operate sometimes. I'm like, let's just get into it, forgetting there's certain things I have to do. But today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So we are going to get into, obviously, I don't know if I want to say surprising departure of Josh Gattis. I don't necessarily think it's 100% surprising. Is it ideal? Not necessarily, but we'll talk about it, right? We'll talk about it's kind of a weird thing to me that there are so many upset people, because it's kind of like the Jim Harbaugh thing in a way, where it's like a lot of the people I feel whose voice is raised the loudest when it comes to this are the ones that wanted him gone after 2020. And I think he was on thin ice coming out of 2020 and obviously did quite well in 2021. Michigan suddenly had one of the top offenses in the country. It was really dynamic and diverse, but it took a lot of the year to get there. And certainly after the Rutgers game this year, no one was clamoring to keep Josh Gattis as the offensive coordinator. I obviously am disappointed in the sense that he was a pleasure to work with. Certainly from a personal standpoint, I felt that. You can make of that what you will, but it's disheartening in that sense. But it's not a good look the way he kind of exited. And I know he didn't intend necessarily for his text message to get out to the general public, but it's bound to happen, especially if you're bad-mouthing kind of the school that the players are still a part of. It's probably not going to be a good thing for you. You know what I mean? So it is not the greatest thing. So let's get into all of it. Number one, obviously, he's leaving for Miami. A lot of people have pointed out that is a lateral move at best. And some people get a lot of consternation from it and say, like, that's a bad look. I would implore you to think of it in a different way, in the sense of when a coach leaves and they take a position, that same position elsewhere, and it's not as prestigious of a location, which unfortunately for the U, which a lot of you, my regular listeners and or watchers might know, that's my adopted number 2 team. That should tell you something. And I'm not meaning to I'm not saying this to disparage some other coaches, because Mike Zordich was long one of my favorites. I still talk to Ed Warner, so that's not to disparage them, but when you don't get a promotion, especially if you're in the case of Josh Gattis, where you were thought of as a head coach, if not necessarily in waiting at Michigan, it seems pretty clear that was not the case based off of his text. But if it seems like, all right, I'm going to be the head coach somewhere, and I'm going to go start over with a rebuild project like in Miami, that should tell you something, because you don't think Josh Gattis wants to run it back in a way with pretty much his entire same offense for another year? I mean, that should kind of tell you that this wasn't I'm not saying he didn't leave on his own volition. I do think he did, but that Michigan wasn't exactly fighting to be like, no, please stay, we need you. So those things aren't ideal, when it's a situation where you're about to become a head coach. It seems you interviewed at a place like Virginia. You were certainly going to be one after this next year if things went according to plan. But you go to a place that's a rebuild, because that's essentially either you are going to you're going to have to kill it right away, or otherwise you're forestalling your own career progress. So I think that should tell you what you need to know in the sense of if a guy is going to take it, going to leave, because keep in mind, I'm not saying, again, I think he left of his own volition. I don't think Michigan was firing him by any stretch. I'm not even alluding to that. But if Michigan really wanted to keep him, then he probably would have stayed. And keeping in mind that Michigan doesn't really fire people either. Again, I'm not alluding. I know it sounds like I am. I'm just kind of thinking about the dynamics of what happens inside that building. So it's I don't think he was fired. Again, I want to reiterate that before people come at me and say, well, Isaiah's alluding to. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just thinking out loud partially here. But it's one of those things where if Michigan did, and this is what I am saying, if Michigan did want to keep him, it would have kept him, So it is what it is. And it's disappointing now that you're working on two coordinators. But hey, if Josh didn't want to be here, if he didn't want to be in Ann Arbor, then go and get some people who do. And it clearly they have their succession plan in mind. And I'm not surprised, partially because I think we talked about it this time, just about this time. Actually, it was much later, this after spring ball last year, when the presumed offensive coordinator ended up being hired. So we will get into that. But before we do, BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple weeks. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcast, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's continue this discussion of Josh Gattis. I obviously don't have a ton to add in terms of what he did. We all know what he did in the sense of how this offense progressed. But it didn't look great in year one, and that's not his fault, in my opinion. I mean, number one, it takes offenses a lot more time to gel than it does defenses. Number two, Shea Patterson got injured on the very first play from scrimmage against Middle Tennessee. I feel like you were starting to see a lot more of what that offense had, had an opportunity to present. And number three, it was a lot of learning. But at the same time, I think that when you look at what this offense was this year, it did not look at all like what it started to look like in 2019. Not at all what it looked like in 2020. Very much, I mean, you can see the influence of a Mr. Matt Weiss, in my opinion, who came aboard as being the run game coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens. And Matt Weiss is the presumed offensive coordinator. It has not been announced, obviously, as of yet. I'm sure that it's not necessarily a done deal. And obviously, I'm checking whenever I get a notification on my phone. I'm checking to make sure, because one of these types of things can break in a hurry. But it seems like when you've got Sam Webb, Angelique Shingelis, Chris Ballas, all kind of pointing to the fact that Matt Weiss is going to be the guy. He's going to be the guy. But there's something that we talked about back last year in April, May, whenever it was that Brian Jean-Marie departed and Matt Weiss came aboard. I was saying Michigan was getting an offensive coordinator type in Matt Weiss, that he was maybe the most important hire of the entire cycle outside of whatever Mike McDonald was doing, because I think everyone kind of thought going into last year that Gattis had one more year left. It just for a minute looked like, well, maybe it's two. But now it just feels like, all right, now you're starting to get into what the plan kind of probably was internally, if maybe not internally as much as inside Jim Harbaugh's head, And so now Michigan it's going to move forward most likely with Matt Weiss. And I think it's evident in the sense of Michigan went back to a much more Harbaugh look in a lot of ways. They went to a little bit more of a, not a little bit more, but, very run heavy, lots of different dynamic blocking schemes, and not just keeping in mind, they started getting away from this even last year, Ed Warner, but for a while, like I remember Ed Warner said, like, I run zone because zone can block anything. And then that's what he said in 2018, one of those years. And then by by the end of his tenure, they're running zone, they're running man, they're doing power schemes, they're doing gap schemes, all these things. So then it all changes. And then they diversify even more. I don't think that was necessarily a Josh Gattis thing. That said, Josh Gattis certainly in 2019 and 2020 was running his own show. And I still think he was mostly running his own show, but in 2021. But things got diversified quite a bit. And some of that might have been out of the necessity after Ronnie Bell went down. But certainly they got away from, quote, speed and space. And we're doing it in a much, much different way. And it looked very similar to what you would see in Baltimore. Michigan and Baltimore certainly have had a synergy when it's come to the way that these two programs have operated. And I mean, that's no mistake or secret given the Harbaugh brothers. But with that in mind, I don't think that the offense is going to lose a beat based off of you're keeping things somewhat intact. Now, I know that I want to thank someone for sending me a screenshot of what Sam Webb said, which also correlates exactly with what Chris Ballas said. It sounds like that the staff is going to look like this. Matt Weiss is offensive coordinator. Sharon Moore still is offensive line coach, co-offensive coordinator. Mike Hart, running backs coach, associate head coach. They're going to move Mike Hart, it sounds like, to the other side of the ball. And Ron Bellamy coming in for wide receivers. And then for tight ends, that I'm not really. Grant Newsome was the one that was bandied about. So not to share paywalled information, but considering that's two different people that have the same paywalled information, I'm going to go ahead and just do it there. I don't have any personal insight as far as I didn't get that from anyone other than those. But with that in mind, that seems to be what your offensive staff looks like. And that's enough, right? That is, I think, enough continuity based off of what they had last year. Because what you really wanted to keep is the scheme, which Matt Weiss certainly will keep and maybe add to the scheme. And you want to keep Sharon Moore in his same spot and Mike Hart in his same spot, assuming Mike Hart does indeed stay. Because Angelique Shingelis did tweet on Sunday that he is getting some NFL interest. So that could certainly change things, but you hope that he stays at his alma mater. So with that in mind, I think that still, I mean, it's not quite the same as literally having the band come back together as it felt like it was going to happen. It felt like there was only one loss going into the offseason, and that was going to be Sean Nua. But otherwise, everyone's the same. Everyone's back. But you know what? This is the nature of college football. And Gattis leaving in general, I mean, it's kind of funny seeing the sky is falling, the Chicken Little type attitude that I saw on social media. Because the thing about it is it's something that happens at major programs all the time. It's rare that you have to hire a new offensive and defensive coordinator. If Jim Harbaugh had left, they were going to have to do that anyway. You know what I mean? But you see the Alabamas of the world have to do that all the time. Clemson hadn't had to until this year. They've managed to keep Tony Elliott and Brent Venables for a long time here, but otherwise, I mean, you see it all the time. Georgia's going through it, and it's funny because you see the people who are hand-wringing, mostly rival fans, trying to sit there and say, like, yeah, but look at how Michigan's doing it. They had all this winning, and now people are leaving on bad terms. It doesn't really matter. You know, like, as long as the crew that's together is on the same page when the season actually starts, that's what matters. It doesn't matter of like, well, that guy left because he had a beef with head coach or administration or whatever it is. And it doesn't sound like Gattis had much of a anger thing with Jim as much as it was, you know, where his pecking order in the potential of becoming Michigan's next head coach. Not that it matters now the gym's coming back, but it's just, to me, it doesn't matter. All that matters is, are all the coaches that are together for the season, are they on the same page? And then are the players on the same page as them? That is the important thing. So I think that it's absolutely fine. I'm not trying to spin it. I'm not trying to make it into anything other than what it is. It's fine. Does it suck to lose a Broyles Award winner? Absolutely. But I'm also not going to pretend that, as good as the offense ended up being last year, that it was very dynamic, that it was Ohio State's offense. I'm not going to pretend that that was the case, because it wasn't. Because when they went up against an extremely tough Georgia defense, there were no answers. So I'm not going to pretend that it was Alabama's offense, So it's not ideal, but it's fine. And now Michigan also does know, in order to move ahead, make the next step, if we can do that, there has to be changes. And I'm, again, not insinuating that Gattis was pushed out. I don't think that's the case. I'm just saying that you needed to be able to push further into the bag. And Matt Weiss, a guy who has been with Harbaugh, not necessarily Jim, but been with Jim at Stanford and then John in Baltimore, a guy that if you named him a coordinator last year at an NFL program, no one would have batted an eye. I think that Michigan's going to be fine, right, with him leading the charge if he is indeed the candidate. Certainly they're saying there's other candidates, but it just seems like Matt Weiss is most likely the guy. All right, let's touch on some basketball here for a minute, because we got a couple more minutes before we fully move on. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about Built Bar. Y'all know how much I love Built Bar. If you don't know what Built Bar is, it's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It is high protein, low calorie, low carb. It is everything that you want. I can have 2 at a time, and I'm still not feeling like the glutton that I am, because it's still less calories and higher protein than getting a Metrics Big 100, which used to be my go-to. I have bought dozens of boxes of my own money, of my own volition. So I am telling you, it is the right way to go. So join me on my, I don't know, escapade. That's not the right word, but that's the word that comes to mind. Join me in enjoying Built Bar by going to Built.com using the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. That's Built.com, promo code LOCKED15. All right, let's finish out talking a little basketball. Before we do, I do want to note that while I am live here this Monday night, all shows will not be live this week. So if some big news breaks on, say, Thursday or Friday, we will address those next week, because I, as said, am going out of town to visit my grandparents down in Florida. Thank you for those who have given your prayers. My grandpa actually has made I don't want to say huge recovery, but a great turn for the better, which is shocked the neurologists. So that's I keep the prayers coming, and I appreciate you, but I will not have a live episode on Thursday or Friday, maybe not even Wednesday. So you will see me in this exact same outfit, I believe, on Friday because I'm recording Friday's episode now. Zuri, apparently, if you're watching, is joining us for this show right now because she is needy and needs attention. But speaking of needs attention, I have not talked enough about Michigan basketball, perhaps because they aren't really killing it. But Michigan went on the road to Purdue, and it did not. The game didn't disappoint in the sense of it was a really good game, but the Wolverines just couldn't get it done. Defensively, it's been a debacle. To some degree, I think that it's fine against Purdue, who has the most efficient offense in the country. It's going to be really hard to slow them down. But they slowed them down a little bit on the perimeter. And certainly they shot, like when Michigan didn't shoot very well at the beginning, they made up for it and shot very well basically after the first 4 minutes. Hunter Dickinson had a beastly game. Unfortunately, down the stretch at the very end, couple costly turnovers, missed shot, had a career high, I believe, of 28. and really kind of put the team on his back. Still would like to see more from the bench. They played a lot better than they did the previous game. But, 11 points needs to be better. You need to get way more production out of the bench, especially considering this is the thing is, like, you've got a guy who was a starter in Brandon Johns who's really not giving you much of anything. Terrence Williams seems like he comes in and does something here and there. We're starting, we see a little bit of Frankie Collins. Kobe Buffkin had a 3, and it seems like he's good for one of those a game. But it's crunch time now, especially because you've got a game on Tuesday, you've got a game on Thursday, you've got a game on Saturday, you've got a game, I think it's Wednesday the next week. It all, and there are a lot of tough opponents. Michigan's going to need to get some of those, right? They can't keep, having a jolly good effort, folks. They got to go out there and actually win some of these games that are coming up. And it can be done. There's some of them are at home. You got this Penn State game on the road on Tuesday. You've got Purdue and Ohio State coming up. Certainly, Ohio State's been very good. Purdue continues to obviously be good, but we'll see if that changes when they play them at home. They're going to have to play them with that same energy and try to go 1-0 each game. They cannot sit there and rest on their laurels. Not laurels because they don't have any this year, but they can't sit back and say, well, we're not very good. So, they can turn things around. It's just, and you can see glimpses of it. You can see glimpses of Eli Brooks looking like a game changer. Devontae Jones, it seems like more and more, is taking his own shot, getting into the lane and making something happen. They were very good at getting those contested shots inside in this last game. But the unfortunate thing is points in the paint. As good of a job as Dickinson did on Edey, did not do nearly as good of a job on Travion Williams. So that battle's going to happen again this week. So they need to figure out some things. All right. Well, that's going to do it for me today. But I don't know the order of which these are all going to go. But here's the plan for the week, just to give you an idea. So we're going to have Matt Leach, my roommate. He's also on WTKA, the son of famed quarterback Rick Leach. He's going to join us to talk about the state of Michigan football and maybe basketball, depending on just where the conversation goes. He will be on this week. Jake Butt, we'll have an episode with Jake Butt. He talks about the impact of everything. That'll probably be earlier in this week. We're doing the mailbag on Wednesday. The call for questions is already up on Twitter. I'm recording it on Tuesday night, so please get those questions in. And the show that's going to run on Friday that I'm going to record here momentarily is going to be about my own personal Michigan journey, because sometimes I feel like I get a lot of questions about how are you, where you're at. I get personal questions just about, my life and all of that, of course. So I'm going to kind of just share that in a 20-something, 30-minute episode on Friday. Nice little easy listening situation. But anyway, thank you for watching and or listening. We will be back on Tuesday. We're going to still have 5 episodes this week, but just remember, some big news breaks on Thursday. It's going to be it's going to be next week that you get it. So get my reaction to it. So not necessarily timely, but family first. So anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.